Today, we look into the final hours of a woman the world adored and the story no one truly dares to tell. This is not about royalty. This is about what lies beneath. It was the 31st of August, 1997. The streets of Paris glistened under the dim city lights as a black Mercedes-Benz S280 sped through the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. Just minutes before, the car had pulled out from the Ritz Hotel, attempting to flee a swarm of paparazzi. Inside the vehicle sat Princess Diana, her companion Dodi Fayed, their driver Henri Paul, and a bodyguard. Moments later, the car crashed into the 13th pillar of the tunnel. Dodi was killed instantly. Diana, still alive, barely was trapped in the wreckage. Emergency services arrived after a delay. The only surviving passenger, Trevor Rees-Jones, suffered severe facial injuries and lost all memory of the crash. Henri Paul, the driver, was later said to be drunk, despite conflicting testimonies and strange toxicology inconsistencies. There were no functioning CCTV cameras in the tunnel. None from the Ritz recorded their departure, and the only reported eyewitness photographer vanished shortly after. Within hours, the world mourned. Candlelit vigils, rivers of flowers outside Kensington Palace, and yet amid the collective grief, questions were already whispering, why was the ambulance so slow? Why was Diana taken to a distant hospital instead of the closest one? Who really benefited from her death? She was no longer the obedient royal. She had divorced the future king. She had spoken out against the monarchy, accused them of abandonment, and was now dating the Muslim heir to a billionaire empire. Days before her death, Diana reportedly wrote that she feared they were planning a car accident to silence her. An accident? Maybe. But too many pieces don't fit. Today, we revisit one of the most disturbing and controversial tragedies of our time, a death wrapped in silence, power, and unresolved truths. This is the story of Princess Diana, the death that was never considered an accident. When Diana Spencer married Prince Charles in 1981, the world witnessed what was hailed as the fairy tale wedding of the century. She was only 20, shy, beautiful, a kindergarten assistant who had suddenly become the future Queen of England. But beneath the royal fanfare, the cracks were already forming. Diana was not just a commoner marrying into royalty. She was a young woman with emotions, instincts, and a profound sense of empathy traits that clashed with the cold, ritualistic machinery of the British monarchy. She smiled, she touched the sick, she walked among AIDS patients without gloves, and the people adored her for it. They called her the People's Princess. But behind palace walls, Diana's growing popularity was not a source of pride. It was a problem. Her marriage to Charles was deeply fractured. While she fulfilled the royal image in public, her private life was marked by profound loneliness. Charles, still emotionally entangled with Camilla Parker Bowles, offered little comfort. Diana developed bulimia. She self-harmed, and she was, by her own admission, crying for help. The royal institution, however, wasn't listening. In 1992, their separation was formally announced. By 1996, they were divorced. But Diana's transformation was just beginning. Freed from royal protocol, she began to speak. She gave a searing interview with the BBC's Panorama, revealing suicidal thoughts, her struggle with mental illness, and famously stating, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded." The interview wasn't just a scandal, it was a declaration of war. The palace was blindsided. Diana had not only broken her silence, she had broken the unspoken rule: never embarrass the crown. After the divorce, Diana was stripped of the title Her Royal Highness. She remained a princess, yes, but no longer an official part of the royal family. Yet she was more powerful than ever, an international icon who no longer answered to Buckingham Palace. She took on landmine campaigns, visited war zones, hugged children with HIV, and continued to dominate headlines around the world. And then came Dodi Al Fayed. The son of Egyptian billionaire Mohammed Al Fayed, Dodi was everything the British elite were not: Arab, Muslim, wealthy, and uncomfortably outside the establishment. The romance played out under relentless media attention was more than a love affair. To some, it was a provocation. A divorced Princess of Wales dating the heir to a Muslim fortune? That was unprecedented, unacceptable. To others, dangerous. Tabloids couldn't get enough of it. But inside royal and political circles, it caused unease. Mohammed Al Fayed later claimed the couple were engaged and that Diana was pregnant. The palace denied it. The British press dismissed it, but Mohammed insisted. Diana was no longer just a former royal. She was an independent, powerful global figure building alliances outside the crown, potentially becoming a stepmother to a Muslim heir. And if the rumors were true, if she really was pregnant, then the legacy of the British royal family stood to be fundamentally altered. But she never got the chance to tell her story or confirm the rumors. She died in a tunnel in Paris, just weeks after telling friends she was being watched. It was a humid summer night in Paris, the 30th of August, 1997. The Ritz Hotel glowed under the street lamps, its golden facade watching over the Place Vendôme like a silent observer. Inside its walls, Princess Diana and Dodi Fayed moved like ghosts, trying to escape the cameras they could never outrun. Paparazzi had followed them across the Mediterranean, through the streets of Paris, to the lobby of this very hotel. There was no privacy. Not anymore. Not ever. That evening, after dinner at the hotel's Imperial Suite, a plan was set in motion, simple, desperate, and doomed. A decoy car would leave through the front entrance. The real escape would take place at the back, quiet and unannounced. The car, a black Mercedes-Benz S 280. The driver, Henri Paul, the hotel's acting head of security. In the passenger seat, Dodi. In the back, Diana and her bodyguard, Trevor Rees-Jones. Only one of them wore a seatbelt. At 12:20 a.m., the car pulled out from the rear exit. The hotel's cameras, for some reason, captured nothing. The car sped into the Paris night, but the shadows followed. A swarm of paparazzi on motorbikes gave chase, weaving recklessly behind them. Diana, seated behind the driver, sat silent. What passed through her mind in those final moments, no one would ever know. 3 minutes later, the car entered the Pontalama tunnel. The Mercedes, traveling at an estimated 100 kilometers per hour, veered slightly, then smashed headfirst into the 13th concrete pillar. The sound echoed off the stone walls. The impact crumpled the front of the car like paper. The tunnel fell into chaos. Dodi Fayed died instantly. Henri Paul was already gone. Trevor Rees-Jones was barely alive, his face shattered. Diana somehow was still breathing unconscious, her body crushed between metal and leather. And yet, for several critical minutes, she remained trapped in the wreckage, while the photographers circled like vultures, snapping pictures instead of helping. None of them expected her to die. But she was dying. The ambulance arrived. Slowly, reports suggest she was extracted from the car after more than 30 minutes. Instead of being rushed to the nearest hospital, La Pitié, Salpêtrière was not the closest. She was driven across the city at a speed that can only be described as deliberate. She went into cardiac arrest en route. At 4 a.m., the world's most photographed woman was declared dead. But the tragedy didn't end there. It only deepened. The first questions arose within hours. Why had the hotel's CCTV system failed to record their departure? Why were there no working cameras in the tunnel, a major urban route in the capital of France? Why had it taken so long for Diana to receive emergency medical care? And why had she been brought to a hospital farther away than necessary? No answers came, only official statements. A drunk driver, a reckless chase, an unavoidable accident. But the public had seen the footage. Henri Paul, minutes before the crash, appeared calm, collected, walking normally. Toxicology reports later claimed he had a blood alcohol level 3 times the legal limit. Others whispered about carbon monoxide levels that made no physiological sense. If he had truly been that intoxicated, how had he walked, spoken, functioned? Something didn't add up. Then came the silence. The bodyguard, the only survivor, had no memory of the event. The eyewitnesses who described seeing a bright flash just before the crash, suggesting a staged blinding technique, were dismissed. A couple who claimed a motorcycle had overtaken them seconds before the impact were never interviewed in court. One photographer, who reportedly captured images of the crash moments after it happened, vanished from public view. The photos were never seen again. And then there was the matter of the vehicle. The Mercedes had been sourced at the last minute, borrowed from a rental company because the Ritz's regular vehicle was unavailable. That particular car had a history of previous accidents, mechanical issues. No one ever confirmed who inspected it before the drive. If there were problems with the brakes, no investigation ever said so. No autopsy was performed in Britain. No independent forensic review. Diana's body was returned quickly, buried swiftly, and the questions were buried with her. In the end, the official narrative prevailed. A tragic accident caused by high speed and a drunk driver. But in the undercurrent of public consciousness, a different truth lingered, one that refused to die. The timing, the precision, the absence of records, the peculiar delays, everything felt too orchestrated, too clean, too convenient. And so the world moved on. But the tunnel remained. The 13th pillar stood where it always had, marked by flowers, candles, and silence. And somewhere, beneath the weight of public grief and institutional denial, the truth waited, quiet, patient, undisturbed. In the weeks that followed the crash, the world tried to grieve. Millions lined the streets for her funeral, their sorrow stretching from Kensington Gardens to Westminster Abbey. But beneath the sea of flowers and candlelight, something darker was growing. Too many things had gone wrong. Too many questions had no answers. It was as if the official narrative had been stitched together too quickly, too cleanly, to silence the noise before it could begin. But the noise only grew louder. Diana was not just a public figure, she was a force, and in her final years, she had begun to shift away from her royal shadow, carving a new identity that frightened powerful people. She had spoken candidly about her isolation, her mental health, the indifference of the crown. Her 1,995 interview with the BBC had shattered tradition, exposed secrets, and turned her into something far more dangerous than a disgraced princess. She had become independent, and, worse, unpredictable. Then came Dodi. Dodi Fayed was not just a romantic partner. He was the Muslim son of Mohammed Al Fayed, an Egyptian-born billionaire with a long-standing animosity toward the British establishment. He was, by all accounts, the kind of man the royal family would never accept. Rumors quickly spread that Diana and Dodi were engaged, that she was pregnant, that she was planning to start a new life beyond the reach of the monarchy. Mohammed Al Fayed himself insisted it was true. The palace refused to comment. The implications were explosive. If the mother of the future King of England were to have a child with a Muslim man, the cultural and political tremors would be felt across the Commonwealth. To those invested in tradition, lineage, and image, such a future was intolerable. Then there was the letter. Diana had once written a private note to her trusted butler, expressing fear that someone was planning a car accident, a brake failure, a fatal head injury. Her words were eerily specific, and the note was dated nearly a year before the crash. She believed she was being watched. She had told friends her phone was being tapped. On multiple occasions, she changed her travel plans last minute, certain that someone was manipulating her movements. Was it paranoia, or was it foresight? Years later, whispers emerged from within the intelligence community. A former MI6 officer suggested that the method of Diana's death bore disturbing similarities to tactics once discussed in training scenarios, a flash of light to blind a driver, causing a crash in a confined space. The claim was dismissed, the source was discredited, the conversation was buried. Trevor Rees-Jones, the sole survivor, never recovered his memory of the crash. A convenient silence. The medical response that night remained suspiciously slow, deviating from standard emergency protocol. The toxicology report of Henri Paul was riddled with inconsistencies, alcohol levels that made little sense, traces of drugs he never showed symptoms of taking, and carbon monoxide levels that defied physiology. The car itself, the Mercedes S280, had been requested at the last minute. It was not a Ritz vehicle, but a loaner with a murky maintenance history. No one fully investigated its condition. No explanation was given as to why a vehicle with such a record was used to transport the most photographed woman in the world. And then there was the silence, thick, institutional, calculated. The royal family said nothing for days, no flag at half-mast, no public statement. Only after intense public outrage did the Queen appear on camera, distant and restrained. It was a reaction that felt more like damage control than mourning. It fueled the fire. What were they hiding? Why the delay? When official inquiries were finally conducted first in France, then in Britain, they were marked by procedural formality, but void of emotional truth. The French declared it an accident. The British inquest took years and ended with a carefully worded verdict: unlawful killing due to the reckless behavior of the paparazzi and the intoxication of the driver. But it stopped there. No mention of the rumors, no investigation into the deeper claims. No challenge to the system that had isolated her in life and dismissed her in death. For many, it wasn't just what was said, it was what was left unsaid. The sense that the truth had been edited, shaped, contained. Decades have passed. The tunnel still stands. The theories have evolved, fractured, been spun into documentaries, books, tabloid headlines. But one thing has never changed: the unease. The feeling that Princess Diana didn't just die, she was erased. Not with violence, but with silence, with timing, with precision. Not every conspiracy is true, but not every truth is convenient. And some deaths are simply too perfect to be accidental. When the funeral ended and the crowds dispersed, Britain entered a strange and unfamiliar quiet. It was not peace, and it certainly wasn't closure. It was something more hollow, an aching pause that settled over the nation like fog. Diana was gone, and with her, something else had been lost: trust. The monarchy, already aging, already distant, had failed to respond with the humanity the moment demanded. Their initial silence, their refusal to lower the flag, their cold grip on protocol, it all deepened the sense that Diana had never truly belonged. In death, as in life, she remained an outsider. But the people did not forget. Across the world, Diana's image only grew stronger. Photographs of her embracing AIDS patients, sitting with landmine victims, kneeling beside children, those images now took on the weight of myth. She had become more than a royal. She was now a symbol of compassion, of rebellion, of what the institution could never be. In the years that followed, her legacy split into two timelines. The official one, the one taught in textbooks and displayed in curated exhibits, spoke of a tragic accident, a media frenzy, a woman who died too young. But the other version lived in whispers, in late-night conversations, in the quiet questions people still asked when no one else was listening. That version remembered Diana not just as a victim of paparazzi, but of a system that found her inconvenient. A system that perhaps never intended to protect her. Her sons grew up in that shadow. One remained, the other walked away, perhaps understanding, more than anyone else, the cost of staying. The royal family adapted, modernized, rebranded, but something was always missing. The public love never returned in quite the same way. The crack in the porcelain had been made visible, and no amount of polish could repair it. Diana's story has been told countless times, from glossy documentaries to unauthorized biographies, each one tugging at the same thread, each one trying to make sense of something that resists explanation. But at the heart of it all, beneath the speculation and spectacle, lies one inescapable truth. Her death changed everything. It changed how the public viewed the media. It changed how the monarchy communicated. It changed how power was seen and questioned. Diana had become the first true modern royal and perhaps the last. In trying to live with authenticity, she had broken something sacred to the institution: control. And for that, some believe she paid the ultimate price. There is no final answer, no hidden tape, no confession waiting to be uncovered. There is only what remains: the grief, the symbols, the silences, and the 13th pillar in a tunnel in Paris. Some say she died fleeing the flash of cameras. Others believe the flashes were always meant to blind more than just a driver. But what everyone agrees on is this: Diana's light was never meant to go out, and yet it did, in the most calculated way possible. If Diana's death was truly an accident, then why does it still feel so deliberate? Why did the cameras stop working at the exact moment she slipped into the night? Why was the emergency response so slow, the destination so far, the driver's blood so contaminated, yet his behavior so composed? Why did every potential witness either vanish, forget, or fall silent? There is no justice in a world that writes off coincidence as truth and calls silence closure. And there is no peace in a story that ends with so many missing pieces. Decades have passed. New scandals have come. The monarchy endures. But beneath the polished speeches and carefully curated images, a question continues to haunt the edges of public memory. Did Diana die because of a tragic miscalculation? Or did she die because someone somewhere decided that she had finally said too much? We may never know. But perhaps that was the point all along. Let us know what you believe. Leave a comment below.